afternoon, everyone. Over the past years, I always started my talks with different questions. And I always ask, when did people get into cryptocurrencies? In 2014, this was still very few people. I asked, who knows about Bitcoin, who knows about blockchain? But today's, everyone kind of does. And I'm not going to specifically talk about blockchain. I am not going to comment on an earlier talk, I don't know who was there, when it was about why blockchain sucks. I want to talk about some questions sociologically, also maybe game theoretically, that come up when there's no one when there's no one in charge. But maybe I do want to ask one question. Maybe you could raise your hand. Who of you actually thinks that blockchain is definitely going to be the future? Could you raise your hand if you think blockchain is definitely going to be the future? Okay, thank you. Who of you thinks that blockchain is not going to be the future? That it's just a hype right now, it's some kind of... okay, a couple of you. That's great, fair. I have quickly heard the intro. You've heard the intro. I have a very different background. I studied medicine, and I come from a completely different reasoning on why I personally think the blockchain is going to be huge. And I will share that in the next 15 minutes. But in order to get there, I do want to challenge one thing, and that is trust as a whole. Can this be created through a decentralized system? Trust is something very, very fundamental. It's something very basic. It takes decades to build. It takes an instant to destroy. And we know this because we as humans, I'm sure, have hurt someone else's trust. We've had companies who destroyed our trust. We don't think much about why we trust someone. Where does this trust come from? Why do we trust a company? Why do we not trust a company? And in order to do this, we actually need to ask ourselves first, what is trust? What is trust? Why do we trust a company? What does a company have to do in order for us to trust them? And we come down, it's actually only two factors. It is about what does a company say that they're going to do, and are they going to do it? It is accountability and predictability. These are the two factors that you can play with for a company, for a person, for a system. And so let's have a look, and let's start with the first one. Let's start with predictability. Let's start with systems, companies saying, we're going to do something, but then they're not going to do something. Every year in the US, there is this competition of people being able to vote on companies that misuse trust the most. And so it's a bracket, and there's these companies that move in step by step. And so basically the winner is in the middle. The winner is basically the loser because it's the company that no one trusts, because people think this company says X and then they're going to do Y. So obviously, companies, systems consistently fail in promising something but satisfying people. And this is the predictability part. So we could ask, maybe take the other side of the equation, maybe solve for accountability. Why do we give these companies so much power? Why don't we give them so much knowledge? Why do we have to trust them in the first place? And this is a topic that we see a lot right now in the news, especially when it comes to social media. We see Facebook, Google, and so on, Twitter, being at the Senate in the US, having to report and answering questions on what do they do with all this data. But we also have this discussion when it comes to money. Why should a bank control all our balances? Is there no better way to solve that? There's one fundamental problem whenever we talk about digital information. It's very, very easy to create digital information, very easy to edit it, and very easy to delete it. We all know this. So for a very long time, people thought it's impossible that with digital data, we can remove the person who is in charge or the company who's in charge. We always need to rely on a centralized party. Trust always has to be centralized. But in 2008, a group or an individual, and most of you know this story, Satoshi Nakamoto, came up with an idea he defined it as Bitcoin, a digital peer-to-peer cash system. But what he actually defined was how to trust when no one is in charge. Because what he defined was a group, a community, could create trust decentralized. Digital information could be stored on a decentralized ledger by chaining information blocks together to something what we call a blockchain today, so that this information is not changeable, it's verifiable by anyone that looks at it, and it's joinable by anyone. So a blockchain is nothing else than a digital file that everyone in this community trusts. So the only question is, what do we store on this blockchain? I recently wrote a book called Blockchain 2.0, More Than Just Bitcoin. I talk about the 100 most innovative blockchain applications that I see out there that are going to revolutionize industries just like the internet did over the past 20 years. The crazy thing about it is, most people are unaware of the power of what blockchain can do to trust, because all they're focused on is cryptocurrencies, it's ICOs, it's a very small niche. It's one of a lot of use cases. The use case that got me into this was being an ER physician as a trauma surgeon in Austria. Every day we had people come in who were injured. I didn't know anything about these patients. These patients came because they had a skiing accident, biking accident. It was impossible to get information from them. Many of them were unconscious. So the big question is, why couldn't these patients have a centralized data storage? They were from Amsterdam, from the UK, from Germany, from the US, from all over the place. Why could they not store their medical history there, so when they come into our praxis, I could just look and see, hey, what's your blood type? What's your past history? What kind of injuries did you have before? What do I have to pay attention to? It comes down to trust. No one would trust a centralized database where all your information is in there, information that's unchangeable. Think about it. If someone knows some genetic disposition and this information leaks to an insurance company, you might get uninsurable. So no one would trust this centralized database. And so I was searching for a way how this could be done better. And in 2014, I learned about blockchain. I had heard about Bitcoin in 2011, wrote it off as a scam because I thought, this is so silly, this is not going to work. I should have looked deeper into it in 2011. But it was in 2014 when I saw a different application of this decentralized ledger. In 2015, I buddy up with a couple of other really talented people, Paul, Toby, Warren, many others, who are using blockchain in the financial industry. And what they're doing is, they founded a company called 10x, where we make cryptocurrencies spendable. Now, you might find this funny and you think, so Julian, you come from medicine, why do you do finance? Well, it was because over the past years, finance was the only application that had a little bit of a use case in blockchain. But I'm telling you, going forward, we're going to see 50, 70, hundreds, thousands of powerful blockchain applications that will change a lot of its industries. One question always remains, though. When no one is in charge, who do we trust? Who do we go to when stuff goes wrong? And if you think nothing goes wrong, let me just paint a few examples over the past couple of years. And we're talking about a very, very short time frame in a very small niche, namely finance. Now, what happens when insurance comes to that, when all these smart contracts comes, when space travel comes that will depend on blockchain? You will see, in order to communicate over very fast distances in space, Elon Musk will have to depend on some kind of decentralized system. In 2016, Ethereum, back then I think back then it was the third largest cryptocurrency. Today it's the second largest cryptocurrency. It's a decentralized computer. It's a smart contract system. It had this wonderful idea of creating something called a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, that would invest automatically without human interference, no centralized party, and it would invest into other projects. Fantastic idea. The code was written, code is law, it's like a contract, and people could invest. And $150 million were invested into this smart contract, this investment vehicle. This was supposed to be superior to anything else. Until a few weeks afterwards, some person, and no one really knows who this person is, actually read the contract and figured out that there was a mistake in the contract, and he could manipulate the contract so he could siphon around $55 million out of this contract. And there was a huge outcry in the community. This hacker is stealing money. This is illegal. But is it? Is it a bug or is it a feature? Everyone could have read the contract. The contract is obvious. Is someone who actually reads physical contracts, looks at loopholes, is this person a scammer, a liar, or is it just a lawyer? And it's the same with someone who actually reads technical contracts. There was no one to go to. No one felt in charge. The person who wrote the contract said it's open source. Everyone could have audited it. It was open source. Everyone could read it. There was no company to complain to. And up until today, 2 years later, it's not really clear even if this person stole the money or if this was just a feature executing a smart contract. And that's the difficulty when no one is in charge. What resulted back then was the community was so divided in their opinion whether this was right or wrong that they actually forked. It's called a fork. And this is how Ethereum Classic got started. Out of this disagreement that came from no one being in charge. ICOs, this revolutionary funding, started around 2 years ago as well, approximately the same time. And every month, companies have raised hundreds and billions of dollars. We at 10x, we also did one of the largest ICOs to date. We raised 80 million US dollars around 1.5 years ago. We did this, just like many other companies, in the hope of being more transparent, creating more trust, doing what many, many investors are scared of, namely companies trying to scam. And you can go on the internet, you can look at our transparency report over the last year, and you will see exactly what are we doing, what are we working on. But the statistic is earth-shattering. 90% of all companies are failing. 80% of all these ICOs are scams. Just recently, a report came out that said 50% of all ICOs that try to raise money don't even raise a significant amount because it did the exact opposite of what ICOs were actually supposed to be doing, namely having an easy way for investors to deposit money in a trustworthy way. And it did the exact opposite. One use case that I always laugh at a bit, because I think it's something that this company might not have thought about, was actually one of the very, very, very first use cases that people came up with a decentralized system. And it's still a very large use case on the Ethereum network. Questionable in my opinion, but I think with some steps maybe it could be very powerful. And it's that of insurance. Insurance is something that's very easy to think of in mathematical terms. It's nothing else than a smart contract. A contract between me as a person and an insurance company. And I make a contract. I say, every month I give you $100. And if this unlikely event of, let's say, my house burning down ever happens, you have to give me a predefined sum, let's say $500,000. And it's a predefined contract. Now, here is the worst case. The worst case is I pay $100, and in this really sad, unlikely case, my house does burn down, the company doesn't pay me. Horrible scenario, because the company doesn't honor the contract. Another really huge problem is overpriced premiums, me paying way too much. So a lot of ideas came up with blockchain smart contract and saying, you know what? Actually, we could remove the company. We put a smart contract there, no people, it's very, very cheap, very, very easy. And every month, instead of paying $100, you only pay half because you don't have all this overhead. So you pay $50 every month. And it's nothing else than a bet on your house not burning down. And should your house burn down, you get $500,000 out of the smart contract. Now here's where it gets tricky. Who is in charge of this entire thing when this is decentralized? So I am making this bet on my house not burning down, and my neighbor says, Julian, this is actually a really fantastic idea. Let me also take an insurance on your house not burning down. Let me pay $50 every month, but not on my house, on your house. If your house burns down, I get $500,000. So you're like, that's a weird thing. But the second neighbor says, hey, you know what, Julian? What a great idea. Let me also use this smart contract, and I'm insuring your house. And then there's the third person, the fourth person, the fifth person, and suddenly you have 100 people who are all betting on your house burning down. So an event that was supposed to be unlikely, namely your house not burning down, might become likely because 100 people would each get $500,000 if your house burned down. And this works because there's no one in charge. And so there's no one to go to. There's very little regulation by design. And so I am talking about these things because I do see them challenging, and I do see huge potential, but I do see a lot of problems. One of the funniest ones happened last year, and I really had to smile with this one. It's a company that really focuses on IoT, Internet of Things. It's a buzzword. And this company said, you know what? There's so many people who are scared of their IoT device being hacked. Self-driving cars, so many people are scared of what happens if my self-driving car gets hacked and it's driving straight into a wall. Well, excellent solution to this. Why not decentralize all of this? Why not decentralize all these Internet of things and no one can attack those things? If one device notices it's off sync, it just shuts down. So it's just not going to work. So the car would just stop and would drive really, really slow to the side of the road. So there was this company, and they had this test run with thermostats. And they said, you know what? Unhackable, decentralized thermostats. Whenever I hear unhackable, all my alarm bells go off. And it didn't take long. A few weeks later, there was a bug introduced to the smart contract. And these thermostats, all around that were affected, started increasing the temperature by 1 degree every hour. So when you had 24 degrees in your room, an hour later it was 25, 26, 27, 28, and no one, not even the company themselves, could switch them off because they were decentralized. By definition, no one was in charge anymore. So what did these homeowners have to do in the trial? Well, they took a chisel and they hammered the thermostat so they would stop heating up the rooms to sauna temperatures. So what I'm making fun of raises a very relevant question. If there is so many problems with decentralization, what is the true long-term vision behind this? If there's no problem to be solved for, we don't need a solution. It's all just hype. It's all just scam. So why actually go for blockchain? Why go for a decentralized system? And I'm telling you, it's interoperability of trust. Trust is something so fundamental. What the internet did to information, making it interoperable, allows you today to be on your phone, to be on your computer, to be on social media, to use video chat, to do all these things because information is interoperable. Trust today is not interoperable. Just because there's a pharmaceutical company in some country producing great pharmaceuticals doesn't mean that you would buy them. Because just because people trust it there doesn't mean you trust it. Any kind of food, anything that's about trust, it's not interoperable. It's only interoperable by companies in the middle, just like banks, like data companies, like any kind of companies that pools these trusts together, and they make shitloads of money from doing that. Now just imagine when trust becomes interoperable. When one trust can connect to the next trust, and you can exactly see how trustworthy is this pharmaceutical company. Think about what this means for prices all around the world, what this means for money, what this means for any kind of contract. It will cut down and burn down all these high fees of intermediaries. And that is what blockchain is going to allow to do. Our company is working on a system called Comet. Now there's other companies who have similar approaches or they look for the things. And Comet is exactly going to do this. We had an alpha release in June. You can look this up. This is really, really powerful. We're going to have the very first prototype of this running this year, hopefully. And this is the beginning of what the internet did 30 years ago. So if we fast forward this, and you have this network of trust, I don't know what company you're working for, what company you're trying to found, which government you're from, which regulation, but you should really pay attention and ask yourself, where's your money coming from right now? Is it coming from because you're connecting two pools that don't know each other, they don't trust each other, but you're the trustworthy intermediary? You're going to be the same dinosaur soon when you're only banking on trust and you're not banking on delivering a valuable service to these users. Because this system of blockchains, decentralized, is going to be very, very powerful going forward in this. There's one thing though, and that is we see a lot of scams. Iced tea, Long Island iced tea, renamed to blockchain iced tea, just for their stock price to go up. So we see so many scams going for this. We saw Theranos, not in blockchain, but they were in pharmaceuticals. And they also tried to trick users by telling them something that wasn't there. So how do you distinguish between that's valuable and that isn't? It's very similar. You just listen to some of the smartest people, Bill Maris in this case, who didn't invest in Theranos. And he said, it was very easy. I just looked at the actual use case. I looked at, are they actually executing? And this is what I think we're going to see a lot coming forward. We're going to see a lot of companies executing. There's one final question to answer, though. So who to trust when no one is in charge? It's very simple. Yourself. Trusting yourself is going to be something that's going to be more important than ever going forward, unless
hotel guests.
Things don't work out the way they should be, just like in this case that I want to finish with.
To leave his room service tray out in the hall.
So this person goes out of the hotel room.
Of course, the door is locked.
Naked. Hotel room's locked.
Guy, yes, he has to use the tray for a bit of cover, and then he heads
so
to the reception
if this
desk.
room was decentralized, this person couldn't go to anyone. This person would now be totally naked. And right now he only has this embarrassing moment going down the elevator.
Don't look. Oh, okay.
So looking at that, I don't think the future is going to be only decentralized, just like it's centralized. It's going to be a mix of this. And so what my call to action is, become what I call crypto fit, understand what blockchain means, what it truly means, not just cryptocurrencies, but what the true power of this is. And see how you can integrate this as an investor, as a business owner, as a government, and make the world a better place. Thank you so much.